They say you shouldn't fall in love with your job, but what do they know? I didn't just love my job, I married it. 15 years ago, I walked into FleetPoint Logistics wearing secondhand heels and a head full of routes, and within 3 months, I was running the floor like a traffic controller in heels. Every delivery, every driver, every unexpected snowstorm, I handled it like a maestro. I wasn't just managing a fleet, I was raising it. You could say those trucks were my kids. I gave them names. I kept spreadsheets on engine quirks, driver snacks, customer preferences. You don't forget the company that needs their shipments wrapped twice because the owner's paranoid about dust. I remembered all that because I cared. I never missed a 4 a.m. call. Not once. Holidays? I was there. Emergencies? I was the emergency line. Drivers came to me for everything. Route changes, bonus issues, girlfriend drama. I even kept Advil and tampons in my desk drawer like a traveling mom unit. And you better believe when I talked, the room listened. Management used to say I had a sixth sense for logistics. What they didn't say was that the whole system only worked because I knew how to read between the lines. Not just what was on the clipboard, but what was happening behind the scenes. I helped that company grow from 12 trucks and a dusty spreadsheet to a $30 million operation with GPS tracking and a wall full of client plaques. And don't get it twisted, those wins didn't come easy. I've slept in my office chair more times than I can count. I've driven out to rescue stranded drivers in the middle of the night. I've soothed irate clients with a smile, even when my own marriage was falling apart. And you know what I asked in return? Respect. Maybe a little loyalty. But loyalty, as I've learned, is a currency some people don't believe in. When the new COO came in, fresh from some overpriced tech company where everything's a system and no one has dirt under their nails, I felt the shift. He had that look in his eye like he was scanning for inefficiencies, and I knew, deep down, that I was too human for his taste. I wasn't an algorithm. I didn't run on code. I ran on instinct, experience, and the kind of emotional intelligence no software can replicate. But people like him, they don't trust what they can't digitize. Still, I held on. I showed up early. I stayed late. I trained his team when they fumbled over basic logistics. I translated the chaos of real-life shipping into bite-sized reports for his fancy dashboards. I even smiled through meetings where he presented my systems like he'd invented them. And through it all, I thought, maybe if I prove my value, they'll see I'm irreplaceable. Spoiler alert, they didn't. But I'll get to that. The first time I saw him, he was wearing a navy suit and no socks. Right then, I should have known. Men like that don't come to learn how things work, they come to change them. He introduced himself as Declan, no last name, like some tech world messiah, and he talked in these irritating buzzword bubbles. Scalability, lean infrastructure, disruption. I remember thinking, he's here to disrupt something, all right. Just hope it isn't me. Of course it was me. He never asked how we kept routes flexible when a driver called out sick last minute. Never asked how we handled clients with fragile egos who needed to feel like they were our only priority. Instead, Declan asked about API integrations and delivery automation. And to be fair, I played nice at first. I took him through our systems, showed him how I kept track of driver rotations so no one burned out, how we flagged routes that needed extra buffer time due to weather or construction, or reality. I even walked him through my hand-built client communication templates, crafted after years of trial, error, and way too many 10 p.m. apology emails. He nodded through all of it like I was some antique giving a history lecture. Within a month, he brought in consultants. Young, hungry types with clipped speech, and those startup hoodies that cost more than my car's transmission. They were everywhere, hovering over our internal dashboards, eavesdropping on planning meetings, treating my Excel sheets like they were artifacts from a bygone era. One of them had the nerve to ask me why we were still managing client preference notes manually. I looked him dead in the eye and said, because software doesn't know Mr. Kowalski needs his pallets shrink-wrapped twice and will call screaming if even one corner's loose. He blinked like I'd spoken Latin. Then came the team meetings. Or should I say briefings? That's what Declan called them. Every Monday, he'd stand at the front of the conference room, PowerPoint blazing, outlining how much more efficient things would become once the transition was complete. What transition, you ask? Oh, Just the small matter of replacing most of my systems, and me, with a logistics platform he'd used at his last company. Beatrice's processes are impressive, he'd say with that polished smile, but technology gives us scalability. Scalability. That was his favorite word. At first, I tried to see it as an opportunity. Maybe I'd oversee the implementation, guide them through the nuance of our operation, the human side, the real side. But as the weeks passed, my involvement shrank. First, they stopped looping me in on client updates. Then, my driver logs were handed off to an intern. I didn't even get to do the quarterly route audit, which had been mine for 13 straight years. When I brought it up, Declan told me, "We're streamlining, B. Let's keep you focused on the human resources side for now." Translation: sit down and stay out of the way. The final blow didn't come in a meeting. It came in an email. 1 paragraph, 3 bullet points. Effective immediately, they were transitioning my role. The software would be handling route optimization and scheduling. My new position, driver relations liaison, a polite way of saying glorified receptionist. I sat there staring at the screen, the hum of the office around me like white noise. 15 years reduced to a paragraph and 3 bullet points. No handshake. No thank you. Just a digital nudge toward the nearest exit. But what Declan didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that you don't erase 15 years with software. You can't code experience. You can't automate relationships. You can't scale trust. And I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The morning after the email, I didn't cry. I thought I might, but the tears never came. Instead, I stood in my kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of cheap supermarket coffee, staring out the window like I was waiting for something to arrive. Maybe an apology, maybe clarity. Neither showed up. What did come was silence. After years of waking up to a dozen notifications, driver issues, rerouted shipments, client fires to put out, I had nothing. My phone sat still. My inbox empty. My calendar bare. That silence was louder than any shouting match I'd ever had in a dispatch office. For the first week, I floated. I went to work. I was still employed, technically, but they'd shoved me into a beige cubicle so far from the action, I might as well have been working from the moon. My new duties were vague: support team cohesion, manage driver engagement, serve as a cultural bridge. All fluff. No substance. Declan had carved the soul out of my job and handed me the empty husk. The worst part, watching the system break in slow motion. The software didn't know that 3 of our best drivers couldn't take back-to-back overnight routes because of custody schedules. It didn't know one of our biggest clients had a warehouse manager who refused to work with a driver he didn't like, even if the delivery was on time. It didn't know that preferred window didn't just mean time of day. It meant knowing the client well enough to bend the rules without breaking them. But I knew. I'd always known. And for a while I tried to help. I flagged issues, sent emails, made suggestions. Every time I got the same reply: "Thanks, Beatrice. We'll take it under advisement." They never did. So I stopped offering. I started using my time differently. Took long lunches. Actually used my vacation days for the first time in a decade. I went to the library, checked out business books I'd never had time to read. And most of all, I listened. I listened to drivers gripe in the break room. I listened to admin assistants mutter under their breath about delivery delays and system glitches. I listened to ex-clients. Yes, ex-clients call in to complain about missed SLAs and broken promises. Then one night I got a text. It was from Carlos, a client I'd worked with for 10 years. His company had just missed a huge delivery window, first time in their history. He wanted to know what had changed. I told him the truth. They swapped people for software. His reply: "You still available?" That was the first domino. Over the next few weeks, 3 more clients reached out, not just to vent, but to ask for help. Not from the company, from me. They wanted advice, strategy, even hands-on troubleshooting. The software had made things efficient, sure, but it had also made everything colder, dumber, riskier. At first, I hesitated. I was still technically an employee, and loyalty dies hard. But loyalty without respect is just a slow-motion betrayal. So I said yes. Quietly, carefully, I started consulting. Off the clock, no contracts, just word of mouth. Nothing dramatic. Just me, doing what I'd always done best, solving problems no algorithm could. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even rebellion. It was remembering my worth. And piece by piece, I began to rebuild, not a job, but a future where I didn't need anyone's permission to lead. It started like a whisper, a soft knock at the edge of my world. A client here, a consultant there, folks I'd known for years who were starting to notice what had changed, what had gone missing. The system they'd been promised, it didn't listen. It didn't adapt. It didn't care. I wasn't advertising. I didn't need to. People talk in this industry, quietly, carefully, but constantly. The first real call came on a Thursday morning from Harlan Industries. They were one of our legacy accounts, $1 million contract and notoriously high maintenance. I'd handled them personally for over a decade, knew exactly how to dodge their warehouse delays, who to call when they panicked about truck ETAs, even how to calm the CFO when he got into his quarterly meltdown mode. So when they called me directly, not the company, not the new COO, I knew something was wrong. Beatrice, their head of ops, said, "We're not getting what we used to. Deliveries are late, wrong packaging, missed calls. And your replacement, it's a form response or a dashboard link. No actual answers." I took a breath. I wasn't going to gloat. I wasn't going to slam the company. I just asked, "What do you need?" He told me. I delivered. No invoice. No contract. Just help. Within a week, he called back, not to thank me, but to ask if I'd be open to something more formal. "We don't want to switch logistics companies yet," he said. "But if we did, we'd need someone like you to guide the handoff. Someone like me." Those 3 words stuck in my head like a match waiting for a strike. After that, the trickle became a tide. Clients I hadn't spoken to in months began reaching out. Some were subtle. "Can I just run this issue past you?" Others were bold. "We're about ready to walk. If we do, would you work with us?" Every single one of them had the same problem. The software didn't know what I knew. Didn't remember the things I never had to write down. Didn't notice the nuance that made the difference between a loyal client and a former one. And here's the kicker. They weren't just frustrated. They felt betrayed. They trusted the company because of me, because they believed I'd be the one answering the call, solving the issue, knowing the backstory before they even finished explaining the problem. They didn't want software. They wanted Beatrice. It got to the point where Declan couldn't ignore it. Clients started naming me in meetings. "Where's Beatrice? Can Beatrice weigh in on this routing issue? Is Beatrice still involved?" It was the one thing his polished dashboards and predictive models couldn't fix. Client loyalty tied to a person, not a platform. I could feel the pressure mounting on him like a tire with a slow leak, polite frustration from stakeholders, side eyes and quarterly reviews. Eventually, I heard through the grapevine that they'd lost a key contract, a major retail chain I'd on board myself. The reason? Service inconsistency. Loss of legacy support. Declan tried to save face. He even called me into his office once, all smiles and smoothed-over charm. "We really value your experience, Beatrice," he said. "Maybe there's an opportunity to better integrate your perspective into the broader strategy." I almost laughed. My perspective? I was the strategy. I declined politely. I wasn't angry anymore. I was something scarier, calm, centered, certain. Because while he'd been streamlining, I'd been building. Quietly. Off the books. Behind the scenes. What started as favors had turned into paid gigs. Clients didn't just want advice, they wanted me on retainer. I'd created something that couldn't be replaced, coded, or scaled. Trust. And the company, the one that replaced me with a string of if-then statements, they were stuck. Stuck explaining why loyal clients were suddenly unloyal. Why the numbers were fine on paper, but something felt off. Why the person they thought was expendable had quietly become indispensable, just no longer to them. So no, I didn't burn it down. I just walked out with the match still in my hand. When people ask me how I bounced back, I tell them the truth. I didn't bounce. I built. Quietly, carefully, one relationship at a time. Because this was never about proving them wrong, it was about proving to myself that I'd never needed their permission in the first place. At first, I thought consulting would be a stopgap, a way to stay busy, keep the lights on. But it turned into something much bigger. It wasn't just that clients needed help, they needed someone who understood the rhythm of their business, the texture of their problems. They were drowning in dashboards and automated ticketing systems, and all they really wanted was a human being who could cut through the noise and act. And that was my specialty. So I made it official. I registered a company, FleetSense Consulting. Just me, a laptop, a prepaid phone, and 15 years of hard-earned wisdom. No venture capital, no flashy website, no sales team. Just Beatrice, solving logistics problems before the algorithm even knew there was one. I didn't need to advertise. Word of mouth did the heavy lifting. Within 6 months, I had a steady client list, enough income to finally pay off my car, and, for the first time in over a decade, a calendar I controlled. And let me tell you, freedom tastes different when you've been fed loyalty like breadcrumbs your whole career. I started hiring too. Not a team, not yet, but a handful of contractors, people who've been cast aside by the same kind of cold, clinical optimization that took me out. Drivers, schedulers, warehouse vets. The kind of people who used to get passed over because they didn't have a degree or didn't speak in TED Talk quotes. People with grit. People who knew things. I trained them myself. Not with modules or onboarding flows, but over coffee, over routes, over real conversations. This isn't just consulting, I told them. We don't just solve logistics, we remember people. That's our edge. Meanwhile, FleetPoint was floundering in polite silence. I'd hear bits through old colleagues and former clients. Delivery errors were up. Turnover was climbing. One of the big contracts they bragged about during strategy meetings had walked right into my inbox. Declan, for all his slides and metrics, hadn't factored in the most unquantifiable variable of all, trust. And once that's gone, good luck rebuilding it with code. I wasn't celebrating their downfall. I had no time for that. I was too busy building something real, something mine. And the best part, I started hearing from other women. Operations managers, admins, dispatchers who'd been sidelined or replaced or just forgotten. They'd say things like, "I read what happened to you," or "How did you do it?" And I always told them the same thing. I stopped trying to be the system. I built my own. Because here's what no one tells you. When you spend your whole life keeping something running that doesn't value you, walking away isn't a failure. It's an upgrade. I wasn't replaced. I was set free. And now I pick my own clients. I fire the ones who don't listen. I decide when the workday starts. And when I wake up in the morning, it's not to fix someone else's broken promises. It's to deliver my own. I didn't lose everything. I found myself. Underneath the late nights, the loyalty, the spreadsheets, there was someone who knew her worth. Turns out, all I needed was for someone to underestimate me.